Good morning, everyone. This is the past competition element working group session. So, here, that one. Yeah. Let's try with the usual not well. We're Thursday already, so even if you're a newcomer, you're supposed to be aware of the IPR policy within the IETF. You're supposed to be aware of that even when you subscribe and register to the IETF meeting. So please take some time to be aware of the rules and make sure you abide by them when you contribute to the IETF. So usual stuff. The blue sheets should be running across the room. Make sure you have signed them down before leaving the meeting. It helps us to track the number of attendees and make sure we have a proper room for next meeting and can accommodate every attendee in the room. We have Harry who's taking the minutes. Thank you, Harry. We have also Harry and I think Grove connected to the Jabber. Presenter, please make sure that you come to the mic on the pink cross. Make sure when you have questions to use the mic because we are streaming, we are recording, so everything should be heard by the mics. And make sure everyone can understand what you say. Remember to state your name when you come at the mic also. This is your full boss for Harry taking the minutes and people remote especially. We have people attending remotely, by the way. One of them will be presenting later, so this is not just Siri. There are people connected from remote. So, how I said before, Harry has been appointed as the PC Working Group Secretary. So, thanks again, Harry, for agreeing to take that position. Hadrian is still among us and has succeeded in helping flush the backlog of the PCE document and other stuff related to the PCE working group. So thank you for the help, Adrian. And it's likely that it's your last meeting as a PCE co-chair. So thanks a lot. Thank you for everything, work, guidance, everything. And we hope that we'll be able to read soon the tales from beyond the castle. Thank you. Hopefully we keep seeing you here. The mailing list. As usual, there are many documents that will be presented here that haven't been discussed on the list yet. This is a pity. You don't have to wait for a presentation to trigger discussion on the list. Many things can happen between the meetings, so the list is open 24/7. Please keep on triggering discussion there. That's a way to make the work progress even between the meetings. So it's very useful to force yourself to trigger discussion over there because that's one of the tools in the PC working group. We probably underuse that tool. The wiki. So it's been a while that we've been set up that wiki in place. I think it's correctly up to date, and it allows us to track various queues for document adoption in the working group last call, on shepherding responsibilities and so on. So this is a useful tool. You may be interesting also to bring your updates there if it makes sense. It's open to anyone with an account. So if you feel something isn't accurate, you may also add info there. The link is included in the slide, so have a look at it. It's useful info that goes beyond what the data tracker is already providing. So feel free to look at and maybe comment. Implementation policy. So we've been already talking about that on the list. As you should be aware of, it is required that the working group define an implementation policy for the work they are defining and specifying. So in the PCE working group, we've decided that we should abide by this rule by including an implementation status section in each document. So unless specific reason to be discussed with the chair is identified, we expect that all PCE documents include that kind of section, and it's especially true for documents that are close to the working group last call. Be aware that we won't start the working group last call without addressing this issue. It's been already pointed out on the list. We have a few of them in this situation, so this will be a blocking point starting from now. It is already a blocking point. So please update your document to include this section. It doesn't have to include a lot of things if there are few things to do, but the section must be there and not empty, of course. So the agenda has been shared for a while also, no major change. Fermo will be presenting for remote, which is scheduled. Anyone wants to bash anything in the agenda? Okay, let's move on. Adrian, want to follow?
Yeah, bye. We've been, as Julian said, we've been working quite hard to push the backlog out of the working group. And the result of that is we've now got a lot of documents that are beyond the working group. Since Prague, 2 of them came out as RFCs, the applicability to ACTN and the stateful point-to-multipoint, both of which have been a little while in the production cycle, but it's good to have them out. Then we've got 3 more that are in the RFC editor queue, so they're shortly to become RFCs. The first of those, the segment routing document, is part of cluster 340. A cluster is a group of mutually dependent documents that need to be progressed through the RFC editor as a block. I believe that all of those documents are now with the RFC editor, and 340 is going to come out soon, so that RFC will come. The second one, WSON RWA, is dependent on the GMPLS document that's just a little lower down on this slide, so that's all okay. And hierarchy extensions are in with the authors to make some comments back to the RFC editor. Go on then, Loa.
Loa Anderson. Since MPLS also had at least one document in that cluster 340, I have talked to the RFC editor, and they say that this publication of all those drafts are 6 to 8 weeks out.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. I guess that means that the cluster is freed up, but they haven't edited yet. Yeah. Okay. 2 documents are with the IESG. They're both actually really sort of back with the authors after IESG review and pending updates. I think the authors know what updates they need to make, but if any of the authors is confused, please talk to the chairs and the shepherd to move that forward. And then we've got we've scared our AD, which is quite fun, because part of this moving the backlog means we've suddenly pushed rather a lot of documents through. There are now 6 in various states with the AD or with the IESG. I don't think I need to go through them all, but they're in various states from needing updates after ISG discussion all the way through to pending a review from the area directorate. So quite a range. We've got 2 early code point allocations that are looking quite safe. They expire later this year, but they're both progressing through the publication, so we don't expect any challenges there. And we have no errata in hand.
So now, since there were no working group documents on the agenda, none of the authors asked for agenda slot, but I thought we should put that and let's discuss our working group documents, because those are the most important chartered work that we have already agreed to progress on. So let's go through their status pretty quickly. We have some documents which the authors in the past have claimed that they are nearing working group last call, and as Julian mentioned, the main gating point where they are stuck is the implementation policy that as a working group you all have agreed to, and please talk to us regarding how to progress this, since maybe this is the first time you are adding this. So is there any questions? We are here to help you out, and some of the documents have already added, so you can also refer those documents on the amount of detail. Note that this is this doesn't mean that you must have an implementation. It just means that you must talk about it in the document. And even if you have implementations that are coming or you don't plan to, you can put that information as well in the this section. So start talking about it, and then we can start progressing these documents. The last document in the set is the GMPLS document that got merged during the last meeting. A refresh was promised, which is still pending, which was supposed to deal with more editorial changes. So once that is done, I think this document is also nearing working group last call. And I think Zafar wants to say something.
Yeah, just I mean, I agree about the merge. If you need anything, post this. I'm available for helping with that document.
Okay. So one document which got updated. So let's look at the status of that document, which is our PCEP Yang. One technical change was with respect to key, where LSP ID key also got added into the LSPDB. This is useful in make before break cases where you may have for a temporary multiple LSPs. So using the LSP ID as a key is helpful. So based on that comment, this change was done, and rest of all the comments are related to the RFC style guide and how to properly use the references of drafts and etc., which were discussed on the list, and all those things have been done. As a status, the early Yang Doctor review of this document is also done, but we do not have any implementations of this Yang model yet. So if you are aware of this, or are you planning to implement, please reach out to the authors or on the list or the chairs. Okay, so that's about the Yang model. Some other documents which are not yet fully cooked, but we need to discuss. One is the PCCC. The PCCC document, we did the update was made and it was posted, and they have added the implementation status discussing about what's implemented with respect to PCCC. The second document is the native IP. This was presented last time. There is no update, and I think mostly dependent on the movement that we see in the TEAS working group of the related documents. We have the LSP scheduling. A refresh was made, but no technical changes. Again, I think implementation of this document is something that the authors would like. So if you have plans for implementing this, please reach out to the working group. Two documents which were recently adopted are the FlexGrid and the SRV6 support in PCEP. And one document that we wanted to explicitly discuss was the enhanced errors. This was on agenda in IETF104 and it was presented. After that, we decided that there should be a guideline of all the future documents, how they can use the enhanced errors and notification. So the guideline is, as you can see in the slide, it a request that any new document, if they are defining new error type or notification, they should think about whether this error needs to be propagated in multiple domains and what kind of error criticality condition they should refer. So this is the guideline that at least on the mailing list was agreed on. So if you have any thoughts on this guideline, still reach out to us. And we plan to either put this guideline on Wiki or in the draft itself, or both. And the request would be that since this is our working group document, and if we have consensus on this, let's start making sure that all the documents which define new errors also refer to the enhanced error techniques available. Any comments on this? Good. Okay, so the last slide from the status, we know that you care about your documents and you may be asking chairs that when the adoption thing will happen. We have a little bit of a queue happening here. It's a pretty long queue. We'll slowly get to it. Our first focus was to get the working group LCQ happen, and as you can see, that's empty for us now. But now we have a little bit backlog at the adoption poll thing. So your chairs are aware of it, and we will get on this. And in fact, the adoption poll for the first document is ongoing. Now, our ask from you would be that we would need to hear from you, that we are not just doing this poll for the sake of it. We want to hear whether the working group is interested in it. You can always say that you are not. It doesn't have to be just support. It's your choice of saying that no, this should not be adopted, and the working group effort will wasted while working on this document. So, but please speak out. The silence doesn't give us the clear indicator on gauging the interest in the working group for various items.
Rakesh from Cisco. The PCE path segment has both SR-MPLS as well as SR-V6 path segment right now.
Correct.
The MPLS is a working group document, but the SR-V6 is not. So I think maybe we need to sort that out first before we have adoption call for the PCE path segment.
Sure, discuss among your authors,
yeah,
and come back to us.
Yes, we already did it.
Okay. So Wiki is open. When you make some decisions and you want to remove the document from the adoption poll queue and go back and work on it, or whatever decision that you make, come back to us and let's keep the Wiki up to date so that all in the working group are aware of what's happening within the authors. Okay, thank you. Let's start with the first presentation.
The first presentation is Mike. So if I'm not mistaken, Mike, it's a presentation to the PC working group. Welcome among us.
The first in person.
Yeah.
It's not on.
So my name is Mike Kolushev. I'm presenting on. I'm from Cisco, presenting on behalf of the authors. The purpose of this draft is to clarify stateful PSAP behavior that would leave less room for misinterpreting certain things. And we compiled it as a result of basically ENTC interop exercise. So the main kind of thing that we're doing is we're trying to clarify the meaning of what does state mean in stateful PSAP, and how do you exactly manipulate the state, how do you maintain it. And so we introduce these two databases, the LSP database and the association database. So these are both stored on both the PCC and the PCE, and they have identical structure on the PCC and the PCE. And one thing we also do is we update the RFC 8231 by saying that PC request is not mandatory for the PCC to send. So this simplifies basically LSP bring up. So first, we introduced this LSP database. So we kind of have these 5 basic rules about what it is. And so on the PCC, the LSP database is modified kind of pretty much spontaneously by the PCC whenever it decides to signal a new path. So, and then on the PCE, the LSPDB is only modified by PC report messages. So there's no other way that the PCE can modify its LSP database. And we also clarify that there is a two-tier structure to this database, in that there is something called a tunnel. And this tunnel is a container for LSPs. And so the tunnel is the thing that's identified by the PLSP ID and the symbolic name, and the LSP is identified by the LSP identifiers. And I just want to note that basically this wording of tunnel and LSP is up for discussion. So LSP stands for label switched path, but this applies to non-labeled protocols. And so perhaps saying path database is a better choice instead of LSP database. So, and we also introduced this association database. So this one is more, it can be updated kind of both by messages and configuration on both the PCC and the PCE. And so each, we kind of say that each ASO is a container for LSPs. It's not a container of tunnels. So because if we try to make it a container of tunnels, then it's not possible to do a make before break from one association to another, because you can't say that my re-opt LSP is in a different association than the current LSP. All right. And last is the change we're proposing to RFC 8231, which states that PC request is not mandatory. Because basically the PCE cannot really enforce this. So we found that even if you don't send this request, the PC will still it will still react to your PC report just as well. So it basically saves one message during stateful bring-up, or two messages during stateful bring-up. So I think that's a good thing. And this is the end of my presentation. So I want to leave time for questions.
Igor Briskin. Sorry, Igor Briskin, Huawei. Sorry, Future Way. Okay, so one thing that simple comment. If you want to have a different name for LSP, I would suggest connection. I always like this better than LSP for the reasons you just described. Okay, and basically it is also better than path, because path you would confuse path as computed paths which are not provisioned. So LSP okay. Connection database would be a better term.
Okay, I like that. Yeah.
So this is more for, I guess, a question for the group. Oh, sorry, Andrew Stone, Nokia. I think this is more of a question for the group regarding bullet point 2, the fact that PC request is not supposed to modify state. There may be implementations out there today which are doing reservation with, given, of course, if it's a PC request, you might not expect a report coming back. So there could be timeout mechanisms and other implementations to still hold reservations, primarily in the use case of bandwidth. So I'm wondering, as a group, is that statement that PC request shall not, modify the LSPDB, is that something that should be a may, or is that too restrictive? Or do we generally think that that's a silly idea? That's a question for the group.
Thanks.
Hi, this is Adrian as an individual. Let's think. 3 things. Be really careful about specifying the format of databases in implementations. That makes no difference to interoperability, and what we do is protocols for the wire. So by all means say what information needs to be stored, but how it's stored is up to your competitors to screw up. You want to encourage them to screw it up. Second point, which was kind of just made, I think it's too strong to say a PCE is not supposed to create any state. A PCE probably doesn't need to, but there's this kind of concept of sticky state where you make a request and you don't know whether the network's going to use that information, but you kind of want to get ahead of the IGP just in case they do. So think about that. Okay. And the third one was 8231 updates. I've got this little draft clarifying the use of bits.
Right.
If we're going to make 8231 updates, we should think about whether we bundle them together or not.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to quickly just say about the PC request not modifying the LSPDB. So I think there may be a use case where you kind of use the PCE for OAM. So say you want to ping like an interdomain path, right? And you just want to basically say, give me some path, right? But you don't want to touch the network. You don't want to actually modify any state in the network based on that. Like you just, it's like a, you just want to probe the network, right? You don't want to modify it. So I think that's why, I mean, that we said that, but we're kind of open to whatever the work group says there.
Hi, Lou Berger. I agree with Adrian's point about the databases. You don't want to specify them as formal requirements, but as a conceptual talking point, as a way of characterizing the information that's being stored, I think that's really useful. It's good to have some common terminology.
Right.
So I actually like that. Just don't make it that you actually have to build it that way. Have you thought about protection paths and how you're going to represent them?
Protection? Yeah, I mean, that's just the association object, right?
Well, you can, there's different ways to model if you're thinking about it from a database representation. And you could choose just to leave them uncorrelated, and then you have to walk the whole database to find the association, which ones are associated, or you might do some formal linkages.
Okay. I would say if you could write that on the mailing list in more detail, then I think we can
Okay, it's really just think about how you want to represent that, so it's
okay.
Usable information.
Okay, cool. One thing though about the database, I think we should specify the key of the database, right? Because like if different vendors use, like if one vendor uses the LSP ID as the key and another vendor uses the tunnel ID as the key, like you end up with a broken, they're not going to interrupt, and then nobody wins in that situation.
So I'd say that's an appropriate thing to think about if you are defining data models like Yang models. If you're talking about just sort of informative concepts, it's fine to say that you think of it that way. I don't think you can specify it. If you want to specify it, I think you have to end up with some formal specification language, which we end up with doing Yang.
Well, I mean, okay.
Because, Adrian pointed out, we define behavior on the wire. We don't define behavior inside the node.
Right. In some sense, yeah. Thanks.
Italo Busi from Huawei. I have a question for clarification. You say that the association is not between tunnels, but in TIS, we are modeling in the T-tunnel model association between tunnels. I'm a bit confused by this alignment.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, just trying to understand why we have different viewpoints on different working groups.
Right, so there's basically you can have association between tunnels if every LSP in tunnel A is associated to every LSP in tunnel B, then the two tunnels are associated. But making it per LSP, it gives some more use cases, such as if you're doing bidirectional, for example, then the two LSPs, there may be a reopt LSP, which is associated to the reopt LSP on the other end. It's not associated to the current LSP on the other end. So
this is Adrian again. I think we have a disconnect on terminology that when you're down in the transport world, a No, it's a double disconnect on terminology. Not the layer 4 transport, but the underlying transport. When you're down in the underlying transport world, a tunnel is a pipe. In RSVP-TE world, a tunnel is this conceptual collection of potential connections we call LSPs.
Right.
So Italo's term tunnel is your term LSP.
So
Okay,
my
then I'm
definition of tunnel is very simple. It's just the thing identified by the PLSP ID.
So your point is that the LSP, the association between tunnels is modeled as association between all the LSP on the tunnels. That's the way you address that.
Yeah, you can still, like, in some cases it doesn't make sense to have association between individual LSPs. In that case, you just associate the tunnels by associating all their LSPs.
Yeah. I'm saying that indeed you can associate tunnels, and then you can do that by associating all the LSP, or not. I'm confused.
Igor Busin. So basically, just a clarification. When we model T-tunnel, we're basically saying that LSPs that belong to the same tunnel, like walking and protection LSPs, they do not need any association. They're already children of this tunnel and associated natively for that. When we say associated tunnels, it means that there are tunnels, basically all their connections or only walking connections, it doesn't matter. But for example, there is an association, one supports one direction in data plane and another in opposite direction, and so forth. This is like a higher level of association. So basically putting everything into connection association or LSP association, it actually confuses a lot of things. Okay. So again, LSPs that belong to the same tunnel, they're associated by definition. They do not need association object. The tunnel ID is an association object.
Right. Yeah, and we're not trying to associate two LSPs within the same tunnel. Typically, that there's no use case for that.
But you do not associate LSPs between themselves because they belong to different tunnels. Okay, they're just unprotected tunnels if they have a single LSP.
I'm not sure. You said in your previous thing that we're somehow, I mean, it's not necessary to associate LSPs within the same tunnel. And I'm saying I agree with you there, and we're not trying to do that.
Right. But you do need to associate tunnels basically as parents of
sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And there are different reasons why you do that, but you do not associate them on LSP level. That's what I'm saying. You associate it on the tunnel level.
You can bring that up in the mailing list, and we can think of a solution. Thanks.
Tarek from Juniper. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
So about the association itself, I just want to clarify, you can have multiple types of association.
Right. Of course.
There's diversity, there's co-routedness.
Yeah.
So co-routedness is one example where you want the LSPs of the same tunnel, or possibly forward and reverse, to be associated, right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't think we should dictate that you cannot do it per tunnel, or you cannot. Well, I mean, the LSP granularity is fine by me, which is the fine granularity.
Okay.
But one can choose to do it on per tunnel. And in fact, if you have diversity, you want to always be, this tunnel is diverse from this tunnel, no matter if you do make before break or not. So my comment is not to go technical, but I think dictating it raises a concern. But you should not.
Fair enough. I kind of see what you're saying. So
okay, thanks.
Maybe we can address that. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think the association is per LSP, but the LSPs can be across the different tunnels. So that's how it's modeled in TEAS as well. So I think what you're saying terminology-wise, it kind of makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Rakesh. Yeah, I think there's maybe this rule of it's the ASO as a container for LSPs. Maybe that's left up to the individual ASO definition. Then I think that would be a more generic way.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Mike, as you progress this work on, I think the suggestion that I would give you further is right now it's a mix of clarifying things, mix of making changes into RFC 8231. So we need to scope it a little bit better. And maybe the things that needs to update 8231, work with Adrian, and we scope it as a standards track thing. Okay. And the things which are clarifying, and again, when you are clarifying, I think currently you clarify from the database point of view. and you think of what is the database at PCC, what is the database at PCE. But in IETF we should worry about what's on the wire. So if there is any confusion between what people are encoding in LSP identifier TLV, or people are making mistakes with symbolic path name and some correction needed there, that is more important than how does an implementation stores the information. The same thing with ASOC DB, whether I create a DB or it's a state in my LSP DB itself. Why does it matter? Let that be up to the implementations to figure out.
I agree with you that we should be. Andrew Stone, Nokia. I agree with you that we should be concerned about protocol on the wire stuff. However, in this case, what Mike is trying to do here is clarify interpretation of those values on the wire. So during interop, we ran into that where the meaning of a certain number, the meaning of a certain name, or the expectation of a certain name or number to exist or not exist, and how it was used, there was differences of opinion there. So
yeah, and I agree. So instead of showing it as database at rest, we should show what's the message that the report message or update message should include. That's all.
So my kind of comment to that is it doesn't matter what the message is. So it should, maybe
we are interrupting. The message is more important.
So for example, what I'm saying here in the first point is that the PCC LSP DB is modified by any trigger. It could be PC update, it could be local computation, it could be configuration. So regardless of what triggered it, like I don't need to specify, the same thing the same rule 3 times. I'm just saying that basically it's the trigger is common, and your state changes in one way. So we can discuss that on the mailing list for.
I think
one last.
Okay.
Ron Biram. So this is useful work. I mean, we have had various implementations interpret things different ways. So I think this is really useful. If you're going to add some recommendations for what the association DB needs to look like, and propose terminology for tunnels and things like that, I would encourage you to look at the TE tunnel modeling work that's been done. There's a fair bit of work that's gone into how the associations are specified for connections belonging to various tunnels across various technologies. So take a look at that before you make any recommendations in this document.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. So you have identified some interesting issue to work on here. So please don't wait for the next meeting to progress them on the mailing list.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
So next presenter is Hamian.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Hamian from Huawei, and I'm going to present the first work is state synchronization between stateful PCEs. And firstly, let's briefly recap what has been done in this draft. So basically, the original motivation is to describe the procedure for the sync up function between the stateful PCE communications, and the objective is to make the deployment of PCE in a more resilient way, and we can solve the computation and loop issues for the dependent path computation, like the diversity. So basically, we have also included the scenarios with redundant PCE for backup or do the load balance, and we are also looking to the applicability of this mechanism into the interdomain PCE and the hierarchical PCE scenarios. So this work has been discussed previously in IETF 100, which is almost 2 years ago. So since the presenter has a bad memory, and I would like to reintroduce some of the key concepts in the draft. So firstly, we target on set up a PSEP session between the stateful PCEs, which is named as the state sync session. And the second object would be, say, to synchronize the LSP state between this the stateful PCEs using this session. And this kind of say synchronization can be applied in both directions, and only the incremental state would be required for the state synchronization. So that would be also risky, because if you miss one of them or you duplicate some of the wrong state information, that would be a kind of inconsistent database between the PCE and PCCs. So we also introduced the master and the slave relationship between the PCEs. So for multiple LSPs, and one PCE can become the master and the other can be the slave, and all the LSPs is a kind of delegated to the master PCEs. And we also have some minor contributive text to describe, say, the usage of database version to maintain the latest change. And also we need to maintain the LSP state from multiple sources. And we use an example to describe a kind of how this state synchronization is done. So we're assuming the figure, this is a time order of the 3 phases. And we have one PCC connecting with 2 different PCEs, and there is a kind of synchronization requested between the 2 PCEs. So basically, as very beginning time phase, we have the PCC trigger, let's call it a green message to both PCE number 1 and PCE number 2. But unfortunately, the delay of the PCE message delivery is different to these 2 PCEs, so it is possible that one of them is reached earlier than the other. So this problem would be somehow solved by using the state synchronization sessions, and finally the PCE2 will record the latest LSP state. The green one received from the PCE1 before receives the corresponding message from PCC. And then we suppose there is another change. Let's mark it as the yellow one on the slides. And PCC also need to trigger the changes to both of the PCEs. And again, it reached the PCE number 1 first. So, oh, great, thank you. But yeah, so meanwhile, when the PCC number 1 is propagating the yellow message, the PCE2 is still receiving the green message from the PCC, so that which is a kind of not synchronized state. But given the mechanism specified in this document, we allow the PCE number 2 to figure out which is the latest LSP state with different value, and then the PCE number 2 understand he need to ignore the green one, which is the old one. So, and finally, there is a kind of late message from the PCC to PCE number 2, but that would not affect any changes in the LSP database. So we looked back to what has been discussed in IETF 100, and all the comments has been clarified on how the PCE is interacting with each other, and we have addressed this kind of problem by aligning with other stateful PCEs and hierarchical PCE work. So this would be an important mechanism used for the multiple PCE session. So we request to the working group to adopt this draft, or at least put into the adoption queue. Yeah, rather than do it now. Okay, that's all for presentation.
Any comments? I personally feel that this is important. Some of our recent publishing work, like Stateful HPC and ACTN work, also refer to this document. So this is, if I have feeling that it's not been seen by the right set of eyes yet. So should we ask how many people have read? How many people have read this document? Okay, that's good. Should we check the interest? Why not? So how many people feel that this work is, whether we should be working on this document as a inside a working group? Okay, so almost the same set of people. And anybody has any objection on working group taking on this work? None? Good. Good. We will reconfirm anyway as our usual process things on the list. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And as always, we are open and welcome the technical contribution to work on this work.
And there are some comments to be addressed anyway, but nothing to prevent adoption poll. Sorry.
And this is Hao Mian again. And this time I mark my name with a color. So the next presentation is about the extension on stateful PCE to allow optional processing of the PSAP objects. So basically, we see this kind of discussion on the list talking about the processing of the flags, and this kind of procedure is a kind of missed when we migrate from stateless PCE to stateful. And this draft specifies the usage of P flag and I flag in the PSAP message. So P flag is the semantic meaning is to indicate whether the object is must be processing or it can be optional. And I flag is a follow-up flag indicating that whether the PSAP speaker can ignore this message. So what has been done in the stateful PCE RFC 8231 is they have specified the stateful PCE saying that the usage of P and I flag must be set to 0 in the transmission and should be ignored on the receipt. So the problem is the behavior on the P and I flag in this object. This object is somehow stated, but in the other object, the specification is missing, and we finally find some of the object would be useful if they can have the P and I flag set or not set. So that's the draft. That's about the draft. So we clarify how the P and I flags are used, and to identify the optional objects, and this is applicable to all the objects in the PCE report, update, and initiate message. All of them are in the stateful style. So we also update what would be done if there are some unknown objects based on this kind of flags. So far, we have categorized all the PCE into 2 different classes. One can proceed the P and I flag, and the other cannot do this. So it would be necessary to introduce a new flag to indicate the capability. And we use the stateful PCE capability TLV and introduce the relax format. So if this bit is set, then the PCE can process the P and I flag according to this draft. And if this is not set, then it will always ignore the P and I flag. So this it is worth noting that the kind of relax flag need to be set by both peers. Question, please.
Tarek with Juniper again. So about the relax flag and the PNI, when you say ignore, is there a way to say best effort ignore? Like say you're doing exclusion of multiple addresses or links or nodes. You want to do best effort kind of exclusion or inclusion.
The intention for the ignore means all the information in the object will not be taken care of. Yeah.
There is a case where you're computing a backup path.
If this is not input, what do you mean by best effort?
No, your exclusion constraint is input.
Yeah.
But you want to do best effort kind of,
But if ignored, then there is no such input.
Let me clarify. I think RFC 5440, when we set the P flag in a request message, we basically meant that PCE is free to ignore it, but it is allowed to process it as well. So ideally what we usually do in this case, if the path is found meeting that constraint, we will give that path. But if we are not able to meet the constraint, then we will ignore the object.
Yeah, my point
So this is best effort in my mind. Yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead.
want to ignore it. I want to still consider the object, but on a best effort. So let's say diversity is you're computing two LSP, two paths that are diverse. I cannot find fully diverse paths. They need to merge at one place. I'm okay with that. Is it possible?
It's possible in the diversity association document. So within that association, we try to handle this, not at the whole object level.
Oh, okay. The reason we're discussing this is in the modeling effort we did model this.
Yeah.
Igor Bruskin.
Oops.
So my question is, what happens is that PCE, while doing the path computation, okay, there could be two situations. It is possible to honor, say, inclusion and come up with a path which is longer in delay, that if you would omit this inclusion and get it a better delay. Okay, so how do you handle the compromise between two optimizations? One is following not mandatory inclusions, and another providing like a best delay.
I think you are asking how to balance the optimization between two different parameters.
Yeah. How do you? So basically, what is PCE supposed to do if presented with a choice, ignoring the inclusion, it will come up with a better delay, but honoring the inclusion, it will be closer to the path that was specified, but providing worse delay.
I think this is a general problem for path computation, and my understanding is the PCC can indicate effective objective function.
Right. So
multiple parameters instead of one.
So
that is a little bit away from this document.
So in the modeling that we did in T, right? So basically, the way we address this problem, which is a big problem, right? We address it as honoring this non-mandatory inclusion as an basically optimization. Okay, the same as optimization like best delay, and we provide basically the weight to those optimization. Then PC knows exactly what to do, what would be the best optimization overall. So this, you might consider that.
Yeah, I think we hear the question. I don't know what can be done with the flags, but we can achieve this by setting objective functions and balance between different constraints, or using a kind of like a best effort to.
I think that's an interesting point, but that goes beyond the scope of this very specific document. So Igor, maybe you should trigger something on your list. I know we already talked about these things before in the past, but that's far beyond Hiramo's presentation. Please proceed.
Yeah, just to follow up, there is one RFC talking about the GCO, global concurrent objectives. So, okay, let's move back to the slides. And given this R flag, we can indicate the capability of the PCE to proceeding of all these two flags. And then we give the definition on how to use the P flag and the I flag. So for the P flag, firstly, the semantic meaning is to indicate whether the object with this flag is mandatory if the flag is set, or it's just optional if the flag is not set. So different message would request the flag is indicated by different entity. in different messages. So in PCE update and initiate message, the PCE is entity who should indicate the P flag processing, and PCE report message, this flag should be indicated by PCC. And P equals to 1 means the object must be taken into account. And P equals to 0 means the object can be ignored, and the discussion from maybe Tarek on the best effort is a subcase for P equals to 0. And for regarding the I flag, so in the it will be effective in PCE update and report message, and when it is set, it means there is an optional object is processed, and if it is not set, it means the object is not going to be processed and indicated by different PCE or PCC in the PCE update and report accordingly. And it would be noted that in the PCE initiated, there is the I flag is meaningless and should be ignored. So with the semantic meaning of the P flag and I flag, basically it's P flag. It's the PCE speaker need to check the status of P flag and to process in the following procedure flowchart. So the first step is to check if the flag is set, and need to decide whether the PCE speaker is free to ignore. And if the flag is set, then the PCE also need to figure out whether there are some unknown objects in the object TRV. And if there is, because P flag is set and the PCE must process. So if there is unknown objects, the PSAP should reject the request with an error message. And if everything is known, that would be a kind of normal processing. So in this working document, we reuse the LSP error code TRV defined in stateful PCE RFC, and we have not introduced anything new. So the status, okay, this the status is we updated the text by adding the delegation scenario, and the problem space has been confirmed on the mailing list, and we believe there are other documents talking about other flags, and people agreed on the useful of the document. So again, we are request for the working group to adopt this work. And that's all for the presentation.
Any comment from the room? Any other comment? Yeah.
Hamian, since I'm collecting 8231 updates, if I understand this correctly, you're not proposing any change to 8231. You're proposing an extension that people could choose to implement.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So about this one, I think we're done. You have some probably socialization to achieve on that. And I think it is linked to another issue that has been raised among the comment from Tarek and Igor. So we would be glad to see some parallel discussion, not necessarily linked to that draft itself, but maybe also to the diversity draft, which is also tackling some interesting mechanism linked to Tarek's question. So please make sure that your use case is clearly defined, and we'll take that to the list to progress those, maybe in other document than this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next presenter is Cheng Li.
Never mind. Hi, everyone. Cheng Li from Huawei. And my topic today is conveying. Okay, thanks. Conveying vendor-specific information in PSAP extension for stateful PCE. So basically, what is vendor specification information? So the vendor information can be arbitrary or appropriate information, such as vendor-specific constraint between during the post-computation. Enterprise number uniquely identifies the organization responsible for the definition of the content and meaning of the vendor-specific information. So by definition, this implies inability to interoperate at the functional level between the vendors unless there's some cooperation, right? So the history of vendor specific information is in IFC 7150. It defined that the vendor information object and TLV, which can be used for stateless PCE, but in IFC 74 and 70, it obsolete the previous one, and it defines some new code point for the TLVs. In this IFC, the vendor's information TLV can be used by the PSAP object that allows option TLVs. And also the vendor information object support in PC request and PC reply message. But this IFC didn't mention anything of vendor information for stateful PSAP. So that is what we do in this draft. We extend the extension for supporting the stateful PCE by including vendor information object in PSAP report and PC update, and as well as PC initiate message. So, and as well, the TLV was already supported. So what we have done in this draft is we make some extension in three stateful PCE messages, such as PC report and PC update and PC initiate. So let's take a look at the format of these three messages. Okay, then questions and next steps. So basically, we could like to request the comments from the working group. Is it useful and is it correct? And by the way, is it ready for working group adoption? Any comments?
No one? Sorry. So the question of the usefulness is legitimate, so it would be good to have some feedback on that. Correct, I think so.
Yeah,
you're using some already defined mechanism and make sure it's properly supported in all existing messages that have been defined since. So correctness is okay for me.
Yep.
Usefulness would be interesting to know about from the working group. So if not today, from the list. That's not a complicated document, so read it, please. Do you consider it's useful to clarify your implementations or specification? This is pretty easy to understand, so
yes.
I see Mike coming.
This is Mike from Cisco. Yeah, I think it's very useful actually.
Thanks.
Because, for example, sometimes some vendors, they kind of jump ahead of the what the working group is doing, and sometimes it's useful to just do something in a backward compatible way to signal something. And there's also some things that maybe very specific to a vendor that you also want to signal. So I definitely think it's useful.
Thanks. Thank you.
Looking to Adrian, do you consider that could be linked to any updates to 8231?
You may have to update both 80 to 81 as well because it's initiated.
Yeah,
indeed.
Yeah.
Adrian from Telecom. Here until now, is there any registration in the previous document to limit the usage of the TLV in other message? You have mentioned that this TLV has been put into in two PCEP message, and you want to end it in another 3 message. So I think I just want to, is there any restriction in the, can you see the previous slide?
This one?
Yeah, no.
Previous
Yeah.
one? Okay.
Yeah, here. Is there any restriction in RFC 7417 to restrict the TLV be used in other message?
Message, yeah.
No.
Let me try it. If I understood your question correctly, the 7470 said that this TLV can be carried in any object that allow optional TLV. So that's why when we define stateful objects like SRP and LSP object, we were able to carry the TLV, but we were not able to carry the object.
Yeah.
So this document simply says that you can also carry the vendor information object, not just the TLV.
Oh, okay, I understand.
Yeah, basically, what we have done is we try to do something like that is missed in that IFC. Yes.
So you in this draft just want to make the vendor information object be carried in the PCP.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Jeff?
Jeff, thanks. Jeff, thanks, sir. I suppose this work and it's useful, and in my previous life we were going to use it for quite useful stuff, so I think it should be progressing.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for your feedback. So next presenter is Mike again.
Hi, this is Mike Koldashov from Cisco. So I'll be presenting some brainstorming that we had about how to signal ECMP and UCMP information in PCEP. So we're motivated by the need to encode multiple segment lists for SRT policies. Some of you may know SRT policies, they have these candidate paths. And each candidate path has multiple segment lists, which have UCMP among them. So I just quote the segment routing policy draft here. So I highlighted that it's basically saying that the PCE may compute not just a single segment list, but a set of segment lists as a solution to the optimization problem. So during kind of our brainstorming, we realized that there's actually 2 use cases here. The first use case is when you have a single optimization objective, and this the solution to that objective is multiple ECMP paths. And the second use case is when you have multiple optimization objectives and you want ECMP among those objectives. So you want to signal both these are valid use cases, and in fact, they're kind of orthogonal, which means that they can exist independently of each other. So here I give an example. LSP1 and LSP2 have different optimization objectives, and the PCC wants to have ECMP among LSP1 and LSP2. So LSP1 gets a single path X, and LSP2 gets 2 ECMP paths Y and Z. And so as a result, 50% of the traffic goes on X, 25 on Y, and 25 on Z. So we'll see later that how we propose to represent this in PCEP. So for use case one, which is the single optimization objective yielding multiple paths, we basically propose two ways to encode this. And we would need to extend PSEP to specify the maximum number of paths that a PCC can handle. So for example, if the router can install like 32 outgoing paths with UCMP, then it would just need to signal that number 32. And then the PCE would reply with 32 or less unequal cost multipaths. And so our two kind of options that we propose here are basically different ways of putting multiple ERO objects into the same OSP. So option A would be to introduce this ERO attribute object and basically use it as a separator to separate different EROs. So basically it needs to carry the weight and needs to carry the operator status for each UCMP path and can carry optional TOVs. And then option B is something that Dhruv suggested. Basically this is to reuse something from P2MP. And here we can use already existing objects to separate the EROs. Oops. So there's already this type of S2LS object that is actually very similar to what we're proposing. So if we go with this approach, we would just need to define one new TLV for it to carry the weight. And basically this is what the encoding would look like. So you see ERO1 and ERO2. They're both encoded under the same LSP and they're separated by these endpoints and S2LS objects. And basically the advantage of this approach of option B is that you can reuse the RBNF that's already there in the RFC. And you just need to define one single TLV to do this. So use case 2 is a completely different use case. So it's basically if the PCC knows in advance how many objectives it has. So if it wants like one path on red and one path on blue, and it wants ECMP among those two paths, then basically the PCC would allocate a different PSEP tunnel, and tunnel in the sense of my previous presentation, for each objective. And it would create some new association type, for example, called ECMP association, to bind these tunnels together. So here I give an example of how these two use cases are orthogonal and they exist at the same time. So I already gave this example in the previous slide, so I'm just going to give the PSEP representation. So if you have one LSP, if the PCC has a constraint, for example, it wants 50% traffic on red, 50% on blue, then it would create like LSP1 and LSP2 and put them in a single association. But within the LSP itself, there is the option to return multiple equal cost multipaths, so that you could have 50% going on red as one path and 50% going on blue as two paths. So that's what this is. And that's the end of my presentation.
Pawan Biram, can you go to the slide where you mentioned PSEP tunnel? Okay. I had two comments. Stop here. So 1A, can you go to 1A, the example? Yeah, I think, the previous one, yeah. I think you can still retain this existing BNF if you introduce a sub-object to carry the ingress hop action.
Okay.
So if we ever extend PSEP to signal a multipath via DAG, you could reuse the same sub TLV. So, and then that way you could still use the existing BNF. Today we do have precedents for a CRO where we insert a production object as a second sub-object. So if you think of the load balance specifier as an ingress action, you can just put it as a sub TLV. So that's one comment. Can you go further up? There's one where, yeah, here. So when you say different PSEP tunnel, what do you mean here?
So I mean exactly what I meant in my previous presentation today.
Okay.
Tunnel is the thing identified by the PLSP.
Okay, so there's a single PLSP ID.
You would create, if you want two different objectives, you would create two different PLSP IDs.
Okay. Yeah, that works. Thanks.
Right, thanks.
Just one clarification, Pawan. Even if we do sub-objects to do ERO list, we still need to update our RBNF, because our problem is our report update message only allow us to put one ERO object.
Right.
So list.
You have two options there.
Yeah.
One is today the semantics of ERO would say that you process the first one, and if you see more than one ERO, you ignore the rest. Or you could use SERO as for the additional ones, and that fits your BNF, ERO followed by SEROs, and all of them carry the same.
I think our PSEP RBNF is little bit different, so I'll discuss this with you, and we can go over this.
Sure.
Hi, it's Adrian again. As an individual, I'm trying to sort out in my head how the weighting of traffic across this set is different from the flow spec work that we've got. In other words, it's telling the system what traffic to put on which LSP. Is that a reasonable question to ask?
Don't have the answer for you. I think that's a reasonable question. So I think let me reply actually on the mailing list.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
Thank you.
Chung from Huawei. My question is, why not use the association group to associate the list or the ERO that we can build the like ECMP or UCMP tunnels? And I think we have a draft for as a policy in PSEP. What's the relation between this draft and that draft?
Yeah, so basically there's two use cases, right? So in the first use case, you don't know in advance how many ECMP paths you will get. You just simply say, I can install up to 32 paths, okay? And the PCE then may give you one path, or it may give you 2 paths, or it may give you 16 paths or 32 paths. So in the second use case, that's where you use the optimization objective, or that's where you use the association object to bind the different association objectives. That's when you know, the PCC knows in advance how many objectives it has, and that's when the association is used. So you can't really use the association object in the first use case because the PCC does not know in advance how many LSPs
We'll cut the line after Jeff. Sorry, we're running out of time.
Okay.
Hi, Tarek with Juniper. So on the same slide, I heard you say the two approaches are orthogonal but can coexist.
Yeah,
I was confused. To me, the second option is a specific case of the first option is a specific case of the second, meaning one LSP, one optimization objective is a specific case of multiple LSPs and each have a different optimization objective. Do you see it differently?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not clear if you can clarify.
I mean,
why.
I'll give an example there. So that's where they're.
What I'm trying to say is you have two LSPs here, and each has its own objective function.
Objective function, like
and
optimization
constraints.
objective. Right.
Objective
Okay.
function and constraints.
Right.
But if you wanted one objective function and one constraint, you're free. It's a special case of the. I mean, I don't see
But how
them
many LSPs
orthogonal?
would you create to say your router can install 32 ECMP paths? Would you create 32 LSPs with the same objective?
What I'm trying to say, it's an operator decision to specify I want multiple or one.
I understand, but basically the problem is it becomes very inconvenient because say if your router can install 32 ECMPs, then you would need to say create 32 empty LSPs, delegate them to the PCE, and then the PCE would give you maybe one path and the rest would be empty. So it
Not
becomes
about the
ridiculous.
details. One policy I might choose to do one LSP, one objective. Another policy I might choose to do two of them, two objectives.
One LSP, one objective. You can't have two objectives per LSP. That's
No,
for sure.
that's not what I said. I said one policy, one LSP, one objective. Another policy, two LSPs and two objectives on the same box, and the PCE should be able to.
I mean,
entertain them.
there's no policy here, first of all, right? So that's.
I'm giving you an option where there is a policy. So
I'm not sure what a policy is in terms of PSEP. Like, policy is something SRT. PSEP is.
Okay, no problem. So what I think regardless, I think we should be generalizing rather than restricting. And
yeah, so this is the most.
Case two is the generalization. I'm for it.
I believe that they're both orthogonal, and the only way to generalize it is to have both.
Igor Briskin, I apologize. I didn't read your draft, and I didn't even hear your presentation. I was out. But
by the way, there's no draft.
But I still have a question to you. Okay. So my question is that, say, if I ask for, say, 100G path, okay, and can PC return an answer such like that? I cannot do it in one shot, but I can do it, say, in two ways. One is 40G and another in 60G.
Yeah, it's exactly what this would be. This is use case one.
Okay. And then you can use this as setting up, for example, a set of LSPs, right? That can collectively provide the.
Yeah, or you can say I want like 100 gig path, and with certain constraint, like going on some certain set of links. And I also want like another 100 gig path on some other set of links, and that is use case two. But the original use case that you gave is basically if you request that you want 100 gigs, but the PC cannot give you one path that satisfies 100 gigs, so it would give you two paths back,
Right.
and say ECMP among them.
Can it give like several options, like for example, either this two or this three, something like that? That collectively will satisfies 100G, or it's just one.
List two or list three, like what do you mean?
I mean, say I cannot do it in one shot, right? But I can do either like 60 and 40 or like 300 basically. 30.
Okay, that's an interesting. I mean, you could have like a whole bunch of different
different solutions. I mean, several solutions that you can choose.
Yeah, currently, I mean, what kind of we're thinking is to, I mean, only have one, but that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
So consider that, because we're also considering that.
Okay, thanks.
Please be quick, Jeff.
Jeff Tensor. So to address Adrian's question, the binding of factory tunnel is coming in BGP update as color endpoint. So this is how you know which tunnel is associated with which factory. Here we are mixing a bunch of use cases, and I think we should decouple them. One of them is indeed when you use PC to compute tunnel or number of tunnels that's associated with the policy, rather than trying to provide segmented tunnels because we cannot satisfy a particular number of constraints. They're two completely different things, and mixing them creates a lot of confusion, I think.
They are different things, I agree, but we need to mix them in order to be general.
You know, you need to decompose problem in order to
They are
address it.
decomposed, but we need to handle the case when they're both present.
Sure, but solve one problem and then aggregate.
We're trying to solve both at the same time in one presentation.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. So next presenter is Human.
So my name is Human Bitgoli from Nokia. I'm new to this working group. Please be kind. As the French say, merci beaucoup. So this draft is about point-to-multipoint policy. So just to give an idea why we are introducing this draft, and I think on the unicast side, we have done a really good job for the next generation networks to be simplified. When I say simplified, I mean via a controller, removing some of the MPLS protocols, but multicast is kind of lagging behind. We do have protocols like BEER, which uses the underlay IGP, but when it comes to MPLS transport, as of now, we really need RSVPT, point-to-multipoint MLDP, etc., etc. So just to be in par with unicast, we try to introduce this draft that uses a controller, very thin layer of communication between the controller and the PCC. We are starting with PCEP. Eventually, we're probably going to move on to other protocols too. But basically, the controller figures out the tree using BGPLS. It has all the states in the network. It sees the root and the leaves. It calculates the path from the root to the leaves via a set of policies, which I'll explain later on. And it uses PCE to download, or PCEP to download all that information to the PCC. So basically, what this will give the operators going forward is to bring the multicast in the same level as unicast from programmability on the router itself. So to do this, there is a couple of objects or segments that we are introducing in Spring. And one of them is the point-to-multipoint segment. So basically, the simplest way to explain the point-to-multipoint segment, it's a container that contains the root and a set of leaves. And it needs to be identified via a set of parameters, which you can read the draft and figure that out. How the root and the leaf are discovered, there's nothing new. We can discover them via MPBGP procedures. Those are the NGN VPN procedures, the RFC 6514, 6513. All those discoveries can be communicated up to the PCE via the mechanism that you guys already have and invented previously, as you will read it in the draft or later on in these slides. So there's nothing new here. The only thing you got to keep in mind is you need to understand what is a point-to-multipoint segment. So the next part is, as I mentioned, point-to-multipoint segment actually contains the root and a set of leaves. Obviously, between the root and the leaves, there's a replication points. And that's where the replication segment comes in. In the simplest way to think about the replication segment, think of it as a forwarding instruction at each node. That's the simplest way of putting it. Incoming seed, incoming label for a segment label, for a replication segment that identifies the resource, and then you have outgoing interfaces with outgoing labels that will connect you to the next replication segment. That's it. That's all. One thing you need to keep in mind is two replication segments, they can be disjoined via a unicast SR segment, if you will. In that case, you guys have already invented the seed list. We use the seed list, the unicast SR policy to connect two replication segments together. Another important thing to keep in mind here is replication segments, they cannot be stacked. Why is that? The reason for that is when you get to a replication point that you have multiple OIFs, outgoing OIFs, if you start stacking segments, multicast segments, you really cannot go through every single one of those labels to figure out which is the leaf that is connected on which OIF. In multicast, if you look at only the top of the list, if you will, it will not give you the entire picture on that replication segment for all outgoing interfaces. So this is why when it comes to the replication segment, there's only a single label. That single label on that node will identify the outgoing interfaces and the labels or the seeds that are being used to the next node. Again, this is only true for replication segments. You can connect two replication segments via a seed list and unicast SR policy. So just going through the data path very quickly. The source sends a payload. A payload is an IP, gets to router A. Router A has a replication policy that says to get to router D and E, which are the leaves, your next hop is replication segment C. We push C. Payload is on the bottom. We send it, the packet to C. C looks at the C, the label C, identifies the replication policy or the replication segment, looks at the outgoing instructions, the outgoing OIFs, outgoing interfaces, figures out what is the label that it needs to push on each interface. To D, it pushes D. To E, it pushes E, and it forwards the packet through the according interface to those routers. The next part is fast reroute. The PCE can compute a fast reroute that bypasses the link between A and C. That's via router G. That fast reroute could be TI-LFA, it could be RSVPT, it could be anything. It's beyond the scope of this draft, but you have the fast reroute that is sitting on the data pad, and you can achieve very fast reroutes. Here's an example when there is a node that does not support replication segment on the network. That's node B and F as an example here. So in this case, A's, because PCE knows that node B does not support replication segment, A actually push on a label stack saying that C, which is the next replication segment, is at the bottom of the stack, pushes B for unicast SR seed, and forwards that packet through B to C. B pops the label, C gets the label C, figures out what is the replication segment and forwarding information on C, and forwards the packet that is as it was in the previous slide. Going forward, you can have all the good stuff that you guys have in unicast, candidate path, LSP redundancy, fast reroute, etc., etc. We are using all the draft, all the tools that you guys have already invented. We are not trying to come up with new mechanism. I think you guys have done a great job previously, so we are just using all those tools all over again. Here's the high-level bird's eye view of how the objects look. Again, some of the objects that are already there, candidate paths, nothing new. The only part that as I explained previously, is you need to understand the point-to-multipoint policy and the replication policy. The replication policy can contain multiple candidate paths, and these candidate paths can be used as LSP redundancy. There could be end-to-end, or AKA global optimization, if you will, throughout each one of these candidate paths. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the details of what are the bits and bytes in this draft. You can go read the draft. One of the things that I want to specify is that the RFCs that I put in there, the first two RFCs, they probably don't make sense to anybody. They should be 8231, I believe. Is that what yes. And the second one is 8623, which is the new RFC that you just gave out. So those are some of the current RFCs that we are using. We did try to change and introduce some very minor objects which were necessary. As an example, we are using the CCI object, but currently in the CCI object, you can send down the single label. Going forward, we are using those CCI objects to send down multiple labels for the seed list, for the outgoing interfaces, because there could be multiple outgoing interfaces. Hopefully all these stuff are explained in the draft. If they're not clear, please send the email on the mailing list. And the workflow, I'm not going to go through it too much for the sake of time. I want to leave the rest of the time open for any question, comments that are there. One thing I want to bring up is that from author's point of view, there is one author missing, which he's by the microphone right now. So I do apologize on that. You'll be added on the next one. Please go ahead.
Hi, Holman.
Hello.
This is Tarek with Juniper. I'm going to go easy. Avec plaisir.
Thank you very much.
No
Merci.
So, Mike, we did discuss offline, and I don't want to raise a debate here, but we should be open to the replication segments on transit nodes to be shareable. We will discuss this further, and there might be reasons why not to. I'm open to them. I'll leave it right there. And
that's a very good question, and I know we discussed this, but for the sake of working group, I want to bring up there are some differences between multicast and unicast. One of those differences is, if everybody here remembers the old way we were doing unicast for VPRN even, there was a subnet that was in a VERF that was connected to a tunnel. So a transport tunnel back in the days was really identifying a subnet itself. We went away on the unicast side from this mechanism. We actually have now a VC label or a VERF label, whatever you guys want to call it, that the transport tunnel gets you to the end, and then you pop the transport tunnel, you look at the VERF label or the service label, gets you to the service, and then you do a lookup in that VRF and you figure out where's your IP going. On multicast, unfortunately, we are still stuck in the 18th centuries. So a transport tunnel, a point-to-multipoint LSP, can identify a specific SG. So you're absolutely right. In some cases, we could use replication and reuse it. But for the cases that point-to-multipoint LSP identifies a specific SG within the VERF, we need to have unique identification of that point-to-multipoint LSP throughout the entire path. That's it. Yes, we will work on it, try to figure out whether we can make it reusable.
Thank you, Oman.
Thank you very much.
We'll cut the queue here after the two stunning people. Please go on.
Okay, Chung from Huawei. I'm thinking about that. Should we maintain some state on the replication node, right?
When you say a state, I'm not quite sure. So there is a state. There's definitely a state on the data path, and even depending on the implementation, maybe even on the multicast RIP, there will be a state. It just will remove the protocol.
But the thing is, if you use beer, that won't be some.
No, we are not using beer here.
Yeah,
sorry.
I know that.
Okay.
Yep.
Rishabh Parekh, Cisco. So just to address Tarek's comment, yes, it could be feasible that two different or multiple P2P-SR policies could, in a certain part of the topology, share the same replication state, and therefore you might share the replication policy, but they might diverge, later down the tree. And so to do what you're suggesting, you probably have to carry a tree or a P2P policy context in the data plane anyway. So my point is it is feasible, but it comes at the cost.
Tarek, sorry, I cut the line already. The list open. Thank you. So the next presenter is remote. That's Remo. Remo, if you can be quick, we're running out of time.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, great.
Hi, good morning. Today I'm going to present the extensions to PCE for SR path protection. So first, the introduction. We know that some of critical real-time and live traffic may be transported by SR paths. For example, we may have a SR path from a bank to New York Stock Exchange, which is to be used to send requests for buying or selling stocks. We may also have a SR path connection between operational room and doctor's office, which is used by doctors to do remote surgery. We may also have some kind of SR path to support live events, live broadcast. So for all these SR paths, we need fast protections. So without fast SR protection, we may have big loss. For example, for real-time stock exchange or trade, if we have broken SR pass, then we may lose lots of money. For example, in the bear market, the stock will going down very fast. So bank may send a request to sell as quick as possible to sell stock before the market going down. So without fast protection, if SR pass broken, and then those requests will not executed faster, so we will lose lots of money. So for all these cases, we will have big loss without fast protection for SR pass. So next page. So we'll give a overview about pass protection. So right now we have TLSPs. So for TLSPs, we have end-to-end fast protections. We have ingress protection, we have midpoint protection, and then we also have egress protections. However, for SR pass, we only have a few drafts which proposed to put fast protection for the only midpoint and the egress. So there is a need for provide fast protections for the ingress node of SR pass. So next page. So the extension for PCE for support SR pass ingress protection is a very good fit, because right now we have PCE extensions for SR pass or tunnel. So it's very natural to extend the PCE to support SR pass ingress protections. So next page. So in order to provide SR pass ingress protection, we need to send some information which is needed for ingress protection to the backup ingress node. So the information we need to send to the backup ingress node include backup SR pass, primary ingress node address in some case, and also the description of the traffic which is transported by the SR pass. In addition, so an SR pass may transport some service. So those ID of that service which is transported by the SR pass may also need to send it to the backup egress node. So for some of this information, the encoding we already have. For example, for the SR pass, primary SR pass, because we have extensions for the SRT policy, in that extension we already have extensions for support SR pass encoding. So for backup SR pass encoding, which we can reuse those encodings for SR primary pass. So for the rest of them, we may have some kind of simple extensions to PCE to support backup, support ingress protection. So next page. So before we send those information to backup ingress node, so we also have we need to have some kind of capability exchanges. Next page.
One more. To save time, can we skip the encoding and directly move to the final questions? It wouldn't help. It will not be the best time. Like, we are running a little bit late, so people can go through the encoding in your drafts. So let's just focus on the motivation and some questions.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, I think it's okay. I agree, because the encoding is simple as soon as we decided. Okay, so we need comments and the suggestions or discussions for this one.
So I think I raised some questions on the list as well. So I hope you can answer them a little bit more clearly and explain why we would want the backup ingress to do this protection, and when the source is anyway doing the protection, why should backup ingress detect? And I got not a direct answer, but I thought your answer would be that you don't want to make the backup path active, and only when you detect the failure, at that time you make the backup path active. So these kind of use case, if you think it exists, maybe we can generalize them. And we already do flow spec for identifying of what flow to go into a particular tunnel. So if you have a particular use case, maybe we can think of solving this in a more generic way rather than just as a backup ingress. That's just my personal, without my chair hat on, opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. I think we need to have we generalize this one. So we present some use case in the draft, and that will make more sense. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, Stefan from Orange. I'm sorry I haven't read the draft, but from a first view, it seems similar to the Path Protection Association. Is it really different or not?
I think it's similar. Yeah, yeah, it's similar.
Okay, so what is the value added?
So this, I think your voice is lower. So if you give
yeah, sorry. So you were telling that it's similar to the Path Protection Association. So in this case, what is the value added that you are bringing?
So you mean for compared to which one?
Path Protection Association.
Protection. For.
Let me try to answer. From what I gather, the differences with respect to detection, like primary getting failed, that detection, we never talked about it in association draft. And this document somehow says that it's the job of the backup ingress to somehow detect the primary has failed and now switch the traffic. That's what I gather. I'm not 100% sure. But just so that we can move the conversation along.
Yeah, that's right. So we have different case. So if we allow or let,
Whoever, we have the second speaker ready. Let's go. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay.
So next presenter.
Okay, thank you. Hello everyone, this is Chile. I just here to give a presentation for my colleague, and I think all of them are not able to join this session. And for this presentation, it's about stateful PCE for SI interdomain. For the overview, there are some work I think has been done. They are being done in IETF in different working groups. So I just would like to give an overview of this, but I won't want to read them. Just try to save time. And the next, okay. Oh, come on, this. Okay, for this slide, we just give some analysis about what we could do. The first one I think is a bidirectional path association. The second one I think is the interdomain path correlation, or we can call it association. There are different kinds of location of path segment. It could be located by the path parent PCE, or could be by child PCE or PCC. And in this presentation, in draft, we consider two kinds of scenarios. The first one is the inter-area. The second one is the inter-AS. It could be PCC initiated, or it could be stateful PCE hierarchy PCE scenario. And next, for this slide, we just give some analysis of the case that is the inter-area case, how to stitch this LSP in these three areas together. We just try to use one association group to stitch these two three LSP segments together to form an end-to-end LSP path. And next is an inter-AS solution. And in this case, it's different from the previous one. In this case, we just try to propose to use a stitching label to try to form an end-to-end path, which include the inter-AS path segment and the intra-AS and the inter-AS. It's consists of 5 path segments in this scenario. And this is, I think this draft is just give some overview of the solution that we want to do, but we did not give all the extension that may be needed. There is also another companion draft which is about the association object extension, which will be presented later. And for the next step, we think we will just try to give some detailed solution for the PSAP, and also we welcome any comments and discussion. Yeah, thank you for this one.
Thank you. A similar question was asked in the SR when you presented this in the MPLS working group, that why the path segment is being used for stitching. So I don't want you to answer right now, but this is something that I hope you can discuss in Spring or MPLS, whichever is the right place, and then we can think about doing this work in PCE, because our main concern is whether this segment should be used for stitching itself. That needs to be clarified before.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Another thing, we are also aware there is another similar draft in the working group that we have already talked with also that try to figure out how to proceed with this. Okay, thank you.
So next presenter is Ken.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Qing. I'm here to discuss RGB extension for PCEP security capability support in the PCE discovery. This draft is LSR working group draft. And the basic idea is now we have TCPL support, we have TLS support, we have many different security capability, how to advertise these different capability to allow PCE to communicate with PCC. So a quick update, actually, this draft actually is a RGB extension, so that's why it be discussed in the LSR working group, but it also references RGB extension for PCE discovery that be developed by the PCE working group. So for this draft, actually, we discussed in the LSR working group when during the co-adoption, actually, some of the suggestions is to consider to add the TLA for the key ID and the key name. But to support that, actually, we require to update the RFC 5088 and 5089. So that's actually we make this change actually, and this get adopted in last in the November IETF meeting in 2018. So here, what we like to raise is we really want to get feedback from PCE working group, because when we first bring up this draft, that didn't get a lot of attraction. So we built the consensus in LSR, but we didn't get feedback from the PCE. So for the change we make, actually, we require to update RFC 5088 and 5089 to allow the advertisement, the TLS, several TLA related to the security parameter. So we have some feedback from LSR minister. Some people raise some concern whether we should advertise this long RGB related information. This may impact the RGB performance. But the benefit to allow advertise this kind of capability is actually you can really pick back some the security parameters to simplify the operational. Also, we from also perspective, we think actually this kind of advertisement only take place at the initial stage before you establish the connection between PCC and PCE. So it's not a big deal actually to impact the performance. But we like to hear the feedback from PCE working group about these kind of issues. And for the second issue, actually, it also related to the first issue, that because some people suggest that maybe we can make the bits for the RFC 5088 and 89 rather than to write another document to define these kind of security support. So we are flexible for these issues, and we want to hear your feedback on this. And given the limited time, actually, you can comment right now, or you can comment on the list. We also can follow up how to deal with these issues. So for next step, we will looking for your comments, and also to chair, we want to make sure whether this writer plays in LSR or in PCE working group. Yeah. Comments?
Thank you. So far it's an LSR document, it extended IGPs, so it makes sense. Sharing the information with the PC working group is also fully relevant, so thank for that. Back to the issue quickly, because we won't have much time to go over them. But second issue is, for me, an LSR-related question. If the draft remains in the LSR working group, the way the documents are progressing is up to the LSR group on chairs. And for the first question, as far as I remember, the limitation about further extension was imposed by the IGP-related working groups at that time. So if they're now okay to remove this limitation, I think from the PC standpoint, it's better to have this restriction removed.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll move to the last presentation for today. 3-4 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, this is Chile again. For this presentation, I think it's as I mentioned during last presentation, it's a companion draft of that one. It's about some extension to try to solve the inter-area case. Okay, let's go direct to the inter-area case. And for this case, we just propose to use the association to try to extend the association project to describe the how to associate the LSP in different areas together. And this is a format of the association. We just use some flags to indicate the source, transit, and the destination domain when it is set. This is I think this is the only extension in this document. So next step, just want to request more comments and any discussion. I welcome. Thank you.
Regarding the previous document, I could like to name Chung from Huawei. Regarding the previous presentation, I think it should be an informational draft because there are nothing to do with the extension, right? And that's it.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Yiling from Huawei. Quick comments. I think the T-bit for the transmit LSP is not necessary because if an LSP segment is neither source LSP nor destination LSP, it should be always the transmit LSPs. So I think the T-bit is not necessary.
Sorry, I can't give the answer because I'm not familiar with it.
Okay.
Okay, I can tell your comments to my colleague, and maybe we can discuss on in minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think this document also has the same question about the path segment, and I think the stitching, the association becomes important if you use path segment. So I think that's the key. So for both the documents, let's resolve that, and then we can progress.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other business? Okay. See you in Singapore.
Thank you.
Yeah. We cannot say that association is required. So solve that problem.
So then no need to switch
Yeah, we need to first figure out whether there is such kind of scenario.
Thank you. I've been working on the mailing list.
Okay, I will tell this to my colleague because I'm not familiar with it. I just heard it.
Oh, blue sheets people.